The early days of anime started off as this niche thing that only a few select people would watch. We're talking about those weirdo kids in school that would run around the playground with their arms behind their back. But as the saying goes, be careful who you call ugly in middle school, because anime has become increasingly popular, with some shows even becoming mainstream at this point. While local television continues to play it safe by putting out the same exact show every year, anime feels like it continues to reinvent itself in new and interesting ways. I personally didn't start watching anime until I was in college, which coincidentally was when I was experimenting with another substance, the marijuana. So today we're going to be looking at the best anime to watch while getting stony baloney. I'm going to be avoiding shows that are overly graphic or contain controversial topics, because while I love shows like Attack on Titan and Chainsaw Man, I realize that not everybody wants to look at gross stuff when they're baked out of their mind. We'll be primarily focusing on anime that has unique art styles, really fun music, and generally are just really trippy to look at.
Uh-oh! Hit it into the sky, don't hold back. Before he swings the bat, a real slugger imagines an arc inside his heart, arching directly to heaven. There! That star would make a perfect target.
FLCL, which stands for Furry Curry in Japan, and later translated to Fully Cooly in the West, this show came to me at the perfect moment in my life. At the time, I was stranded in my hometown without a gaming console, and just needed something to pass the time for 3 days. FLCL seemed like the perfect show because it was only one season, and the episodes were generally pretty short. I ended up watching one episode and was immediately hooked. Needless to say, I binged the entire season that very day. Again, season 1 is super short, and I don't want to spoil anything, but a dumbed down explanation is it's about a young boy who gets run over by a girl on a motorcycle. The accident leaves him with this huge bump on his head, which gets bigger and bigger until something comes out of it.
It's getting bigger!
So obviously the heart of the show is essentially about puberty, but it shows these themes in weird and strange ways every episode, which is just really fun to watch when you're super baked. The animation really oozes that classic 2000s Adult Swim style. Also, if you like punk rock, you're gonna fall in love with that soundtrack. My number one tip for watching this show is to watch this series dubbed, which I know will sound like blasphemy for some people. The reason being that there's some really chaotic scenes in the show where the characters will just talk extremely fast, and I felt like this was a lot to process, especially when your brain is already super dopey. FLCL did end up making 2 other seasons, which for whatever reason you can only watch on Adult Swim's website. And while those 2 seasons have some pretty great moments, I think the majority of fans all agree that season 1 is where it's at.
There's a legendary Yakuza who's said to have single-handedly smashed up 10 of his rival clan's offices in one night, completely unarmed. He's called the Immortal Dragon. But I heard that after that went down, he suddenly vanished. What's your occupation?
I'm a house husband.
Here's a rare example of an anime that was produced by Netflix. And no, I'm not talking about those garbage live-action remakes that they've been churning out every year. Originally a manga, Way of the House Husband tells the story of an ex-Yakuza giving up his life of crime to settle down with a nice lady and become a stay-at-home daddy. It doesn't sound like the most exciting plot, but just watching the initial trailer had me hooked. Tatsu, who's our ex-Yakuza, uses his experience in crime to be the best house cleaner, cook, and bargain shopper there is. There's also parts of the episode that are dedicated to his cat, which are just as hilarious. I've seen some people criticize the lack of animation in certain parts of the show, which is fair, but the lack of animation feels pretty intentional here. A decent amount of the scenes play out as if you're reading the original manga. I don't really think it was the animators necessarily being lazy, it's more so to sometimes add to the punchline of the jokes. Way of the House Husband is also obviously a comedy, and it's supposed to be more lighthearted, so I would argue that not every scene has to be super intricately animated like other shows. Either way, as long as you can get past that, Way of the House Husband serves as a great comedy for when your brain cells are extra fried. As I said before, Hollywood and even streaming services continue to play it safe when it comes to releasing the same exact movies every year. That's why it's no wonder that more people are starting to watch not only international films, but also anime films as well. Anime films will sometimes have a larger budget, so sometimes you'll get the chance to see even prettier visuals than you would in a TV series. Obviously there's a lot of these, so when you're out and about, taking rips off that dank roach, Here's some of my favorites. One movie that I really want to highlight is Paprika. It's essentially about a device that allows you to see into people's dreams and what would happen if the device was stolen and used for nefarious purposes. It's honestly pretty similar to Inception, but I would say the visual aspect works even better here. Whether you're smoking ganja or not, this film is amazing to look at. It can sometimes be a bit hard to follow, especially when you watch it for the first time, but it's also just one of those rare movies that you'll continue to think about after the credits roll. Now that I know how the movie ends, I'm really looking forward to seeing all the cues that led up to it on my second watch. You can probably tell that I'm not a film critic or anything, but I really do think that everyone should check this one out.
鮮明に息づく者たちの姿が自分はまだまだやれるようなそんな気にさせてくれる
Compared to the other shows on this list, this one is definitely a little slower and less action-packed, but I will say it is one of the most atmospheric shows on this list. Mushishi is essentially about this dude who's wandering around Japan to help people who are being tormented by these spooky creatures called the Mushi. This makes it sound like it's a generic horror show, but it definitely goes deeper than that. The anime puts a heavy emphasis on nature and the land that each story takes place in. One episode, our protagonist is in a lush and green rainforest. The next episode, he's in a quiet and chilly snow-capped mountain. Again, it's not super heavy on action or like really scary moments. It's more about the main character finding unique ways to heal the people he comes across. The main character is also this like super stoic dude who's walking around smoking a fat doobie every scene. He can also trap some of the Mushi with the power of his vape tricks.
虫に言われたかねえよ。
なんだこいつ、煙のくせに。
The visuals in this show are also just amazing to look at. Again, certainly not the most fast-paced anime out there, but a great one if you just want to relax and vibe to something for 20 minutes. I was debating for a while whether I add Samurai Champloo or Cowboy Bebop on this list. Both shows have the same director, and also use many of the same voice actors. Both series also have episodes that feature the main characters using psychedelics as well. They're both great animated series on their own, but there's one other show by the same director that I felt really needed to be highlighted on this list.
Since man first looked up at the stars, he has dreamed of faraway worlds, imagined encountering alien beings, and then capturing them for money.
Bring it on!
We're talking about Space Dandy. He's a dandy guy. In space. Space Dandy may look very similar to Bebop, but it's an entirely different beast on its own. The show starts off with the main character explaining that boobs are overrated and that he's strictly an ass man. If that doesn't get you hooked, I'm not sure what will. Bebop and Champloo also have some darker and heavier episodes, whereas Space Dandy never really takes itself too seriously. There's also a decent amount of trippy visuals in every action scene. The aliens that the main characters encounter have these insane and really grotesque designs to them as well. I would say the aliens they come across are on par with some of the weirdos that you'd see in a show like Rick and Morty. Watanabe is an amazing director, whether it's Bebop, Champloo, or Space Dandy. I really do think all of those shows deserve a watch with some of that sweet Mary Jane. Honestly, there is just so much great anime out there, and I'm sure I've missed some great contenders on this list. I recently also started watching older anime from the 90s, stuff like the original Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon. These shows are obviously not as intricately animated as current shows today, but they also have a lot of charm to them that can't really be replicated with present day anime as well. But at the end of the day, everyone's opinion is different, and I'd love to see some of your experiences with mixing anime and marijuana. If you liked the video, I just wanted to say, thanks! I'm glad you came along, partner. If you disliked the video, well then,
You're a poopy head. When we spell it out, you're a poopy head.